Welcome to another Skill Builder course. Today we're going to be learning about estimation. Now, I know that most of you want to dive right into the numbers and the dollars and figuring out how much it's going to cost to build that big, beautiful project that you have planned. But before we go there, we really need to understand what is estimation. It's not just about figuring out how much something is going to cost. It also takes into consideration the duration of time that it's going to take to do something, how many hours, how much labor is going to be required, what kind of equipment, how long does that equipment have to be on the job site. So there's a lot of factors that we're going to go into understanding when developing an estimate. So today, what we're going to be going over is generally what is estimation in order to be able to prepare us for the next course in this series, which then goes into estimating components and really starts diving deep into what we need to know to build an estimate. So, getting started, we're going to go ahead and move through what is construction estimating, bringing paper to productivity. In this mini course, we will cover the foundational understanding of what construction estimating is. It is more than just numbers. It's a strategic roadmap that predicts the cost, the types, and the amount of resources and the level of risk that's going to be involved in completing a construction project. So, whether you're new to estimating or sharpening your skills, this course is going to provide real world guidance for building estimates that are not only competitive, but profitable. Estimating is a foundational skill in construction management, and mastering it is going to give you the confidence to build smart, lead effectively, and set up your projects for success from the very beginning. The learning objectives that we want to focus on for this specific training include developing a clear understanding of the role and impact of estimating in construction projects. We're going to learn how accurate estimates serve as the financial and logistical blueprint for a project, shaping everything from feasibility assessments to schedule alignment and contract negotiations. We're going to identify and calculate all core components of a construction estimate, including direct costs, indirect costs, contingencies, and markups. We're going to break down the elements that form a complete estimate, ensuring they can properly allocate costs and understand how each component contributes to project budgeting. We're going to apply practical techniques to read, interpret, and translate contract documents, specifications, and drawings into accurate quantity takeoffs. We're going to gain confidence in extracting measurable data from real project documents and critical skill in transforming project concepts into cost estimates. We're going to integrate risk management strategies into estimates to address external influences, unforeseen conditions, and market volatility. Building estimates based on current data, but also anticipating the unknowns that can affect cost, schedule, and resource allocation. And compile, verify, and present a professional estimate that communicates assumptions, justifies pricing, and supports confident decision making. So, in section 1, understanding an estimate. So, what is an estimate? Again, often when people think of an estimate, they think only of the dollars, how much it's going to cost to do something. But an estimate is, in formal technology in terms, called a swag. So we're going to design a swag at the beginning of a project in order to be able to shape up or outline everything that's going to have an attributed to cost for the project. So, what is this formal terminology swag? Silly, wild ass guess. Because that's all it is. Estimation is a guess, your best guess of how much it's going to cost to do this project. Now, what makes that guess more accurate is the completion of the documents that we're using to create our estimate and the level of construction knowledge and experience that you bring to the table. Now, this is where I want to take just a short break and let you know that if you do not have any construction experience, it's okay. I don't want you to be intimidated thinking that you can't create an estimate because you don't have construction experience. You know how to build your grocery list out, go into the grocery store knowing about how much you're going to be able to spend and still have money in the checking account. We're doing the exact same thing when we're creating an estimate. Now, the more that you know about construction, the more accurate your estimate is going to be able to be. But when you're just starting out, being able to quantify the the amount and calculations of the material, labor, and equipment that's needed for the project is going to get you in that swag budget amount in order to be able to understand about how much this project should cost. So when we are looking at things like a estimate, we need to understand the verbiage that we're using. So an estimate is a budgeted amount of something that we're projecting to do. So that budget is going to be used by architects and owners in order to be able to determine the feasibility of this project. Do we have enough money to be able to build what we want to design? And so that gives us an overall figure of about how much we think this project is going to cost. But there's no actual commitment here because the design hasn't been completed yet. So we don't have a lot of accurate information down on paper to let us know exactly what the deliverable is going to be. Once we get the specifications, the scope of work through the contract, and the drawings to a point, usually about 40 to 60%, we can grab a pretty good idea of about what the end deliverable is going to require. In this, we usually ask for a proposal. A proposal is going to be something that typically comes from the architect for services provided or from a contractor to be able to build something. But a proposal is really something that still has a little bit up in the air, a little bit of negotiation that can still go on, and refining some of the unknowns to bring the number in a little bit tighter. A quote, however, is something that we kind of depend on. So, as an owner receiving a quote, we're taking it on the word of the expert who's providing us with this number that this is pretty close to what they think it's going to be. Now, those are all a little bit flexible, but the one that's not is that bid. So when we're creating an estimate for a bid, we really are preparing for commitment of our firstborn. Okay? We are getting ready to tell somebody that we know that things happen in construction, we know that things change, we know that there's unpredictable risk, but we still believe that under most circumstances, we're going to be able to complete this project for the amount that we have stated. So, when we are creating these estimates, they can be really overwhelming. As a matter of fact, you can have a $40 million estimate, or you can have a $4,000 estimate. No matter how big or how small that estimate is, in order to be able to really quantify the amount of components that are in it that we need to apply cost to, we're going to want to break it down. And so we can break it down into a few different categories. So I've identified 4 categories that we want to take a look at. So we can have direct cost, which is going to apply to things that are very tangible, things that we absolutely know. We go to Home Depot, we purchase lumber, we get a receipt. That is a direct cost to our project. Okay, so those materials that are going to be used to build the project, that we can see the financial investment necessary to secure them in order to be able to contribute to the completion of the project, is going to be direct cost. Indirect costs are things that still cost you money, but that you might not really be aware that they are contributing to the overall cost of the project. So, for instance, an indirect cost could end up being something like overhead, or the HR person that's in your main office that is managing payroll in your main office, but they only contribute about 7% of their salary work time to your project, while the rest of the time that they spend is on other projects or other duties that they have within the home office. So that would be an indirect cost that still needs to be captured by your project, but that we're not really going to be able to pinpoint exactly where that cost is attributed to on the project. Then we have an estimate category of profit. We can't do a job without making money. So we want to be able to identify where our profit is going to come from. Now, we could put profit margin in everything that goes into a project. But if we did that, particularly on what we call public works projects that we have to do competitive bidding on, we may never win a project if we are constantly adding dollars to things in order to put fluff in the number to ensure that we're going to get some money in our pocket. So when we're looking at profit, there's some very distinct areas that we kind of attach profit to. If you're a general contractor, one of those areas would be subcontractors. You are managing their work, you're coordinating and collaborating them with other subcontractors and integrating with your own work that you're performing. And so we might put a percentage on those subcontractors. We might put profit margin on materials that we're purchasing. We're fronting the money for those materials. So it's almost like borrowing money from a bank and then having to pay interest. So that interest would come back to us in a form of profit. So there are different ways that we can identify areas for profit on our project, which is different than contingencies. Contingencies are like a protection mechanism where we're going to identify volume of money or an allowance of money in challenging situations that we anticipate happening in this particular project. So a contingency is a just in case this happens. Now, the problem with the way some people use contingencies is that they believe that contingencies are profit in their pocket if they are not used for any problems. So if you're a general contractor and you've managed a construction project and not had one issue evolve, then it is your belief that you should be rewarded the contingency amount based off of the good management practices that led you to a successful project. And so these are things that can be discussed or negotiated with the owner and how your contract is laid out. In some cases, the owner is going to want reimbursement for contingencies not used. In other cases, general contractors are going to want to have flexibility in the contingencies so that even if the thing that they thought was going to go wrong did not, that they still have money available for other things that may happen during the progress of their construction project. So once we have these categories figured out, we can identify the different reasons of why we are going to want to have an estimate. So we're using an estimate to be able to determine the feasibility of the project. Have we over-designed this project? And that means is the complexity to build this project going to stay within the bounds of our budget? Is the quality of material that's been identified for this project going to remain within the bounds of the estimate? Is the volume of the work designed and expected going to be able to be built with the budget that we have? So determining feasibility up front is extremely important because this allows us to put other mechanisms in place if we find that we don't have enough money. So that's when we can do things like value engineering, or we can identify alternates, or any alternate projects that we might be able to pull out for credits at the last minute before we go to bid on this particular project. We use estimates for our planning. So once again, planning of whether or not this job is going to be able to move forward and that it is feasible. But we also use our estimate in being able to plan different segments of work, different volumes of money or budget that we may have available during different parts of the project. And so if we're going to be short on money towards the end of the project, we're going to know early enough in the progress of the work when we have to go and request additional funds, or when we have to look at bonding, or whatever your funding mechanism is going to be. Estimates also help us anticipate challenges. So right off the bat, if we know that something's going to be too expensive, but it's something that's mandated or something that the owner has to have, then we're able to give ourselves some time for some strategic alignment and planning in trying to anticipate these challenges that will come up during the project itself. We're always looking for money, so always looking for opportunities for profit. But I will tell you, the majority of that profit and those opportunities is going to come in the effectiveness, efficiency, and productivity of the work taking place. So you can put a percentage of profit in the different areas within your estimate. But if the people out on the job site aren't working efficiently, then no matter how hard you try to put an estimate together, it's not ever going to be able to show profit. So it's really important that when you're working on these estimates that you coordinate with your scheduler and your superintendent in order to be able to understand the delivery method and the means and methods of which this project is going to be produced. Then we're going to identify potential value engineering. Value engineering is not taking money or items out of the contract. We want to be very careful about removing scope of work because we often don't see the full value of that scope of work reimbursed as we remove it out of the project. When we're value engineering, we want the same level of integrity and quality but possibly by using different materials or methods that's going to reduce the cost in the way that we're doing business. And then keeping monetary value honest between parties. When you get an estimate from a subcontractor and they know that you're getting estimates from other subcontractors, this is going to make sure that they're competitive in their bidding and that they're going to give you honest feedback. Section 2, the primary components of an estimate. So we talked about categories. Now, in these categories, we have different components. We have labor, material, equipment, and then we're going to have something that we're going to refer to as add-ons. And then I want to talk a little bit about outside influences. Now, labor is one of the hardest things to estimate. And so it really is going to have a lot to do with the company that you're working with. Are you union? Are you non-union? Do you do commercial work or do you do industrial work? Or do you do residential work? All of these different areas of labor are going to have different hourly rates for the individuals who are performing the work. And those hourly rates are going to be based off of the level of experience of individuals. It's going to depend on what type of discipline the individual is part of, whether it's a carpenter, a plumber, an electrician, or a landscaper. And then it's going to depend on things like our federal money or our public money, which is protected taxpayer money. So there's certain criteria necessary in order to ensure that that money is being managed properly. And so with that is going to come what we call Davis-Bacon or prevailing wage. And then the union wages are going to come in to be able to support the different levels of experience of individuals in different trades. Now, the biggest difference between this is those that are working on the prevailing wage or union side versus those that are working non-union. Because the non-union individuals typically are not going to have what we call fringe benefits included in the hourly rate. Our union, our prevailing wage, they're going to have a base rate and then fringe benefits that are added to that that are going to have an overall hourly rate. It's very important to capture that entire hourly rate when you are determining how many hours it's going to take for them to be able to do their work. We're also going to have another complexity brought into it, and that's going to be our productivity percentage or efficiency. So, for instance, a carpenter is going to have a higher productivity efficiency than potentially a masonry contractor. The reason is because the carpenter's dealing with a lighter material that's easier to handle, which means that they're probably going to be able to get more done in an hour than a mason. A mason, on the other hand, is going to be dealing with CMU block or doing intricate stonework. And so their work is going to produce less completed work. We also have to take into consideration if they're taking those heavy CMU blocks and lifting them up over their head for a retaining wall, because that also is going to reduce the efficiency of the work completed. So a lot of this information is things that we have to research and that we have to find. And depending on what company you work with, they're going to help you develop what we're going to call a unit cost index that you're going to be able to easily reference after you do all the hard work. But you first have to be able to do the foundational base in order to be able to get that list together so that you have an hourly rate for everyone who's going to be working on your particular job site. Then we want to understand materials. So there's two different types of materials. There's the materials that we use to actually build the project that will stay there in place. Okay, so the concrete, the siding, the roofing, the framing, all of that is going to be material we are going to purchase direct cost and leave on the job site. There's other material that we need to consider, like formwork or scaffolding. And this is something that is necessary in order for us to complete our work, but we're going to be removing those materials and taking those back to the laydown area at the main office. And so that's what we want to consider when we're talking about materials. For equipment, we have owned equipment, leased equipment, and rented equipment. And so knowing and understanding the difference of those three components of equipment is going to be very important. But for the most part, we can talk to our local rental company and get a really good idea of what the hourly rate or weekly rate or monthly rate of a piece of equipment is going to be, and be able to use that as a standard foundational base for our unit cost for that piece of equipment. Then we have add-ons. So add-ons could be anything, add-ons that you want to add to your bid. Remembering that every time you add something on, you remove the chance of being selected as the person who's going to be completing this job. Because these add-ons aren't just, free money that you get to put on to the accumulation of the bid. These are things that you're strategically identifying as opportunities that you deserve because of the service that you're providing. So those add-ons are going to be markups on material, on labor, on equipment. Those are going to be sales tax on your material. Your add-ons are going to include things like payroll burden. They could include a profit margin that you want to see on your subcontractors, and or a profit margin that you're looking at for the hard cost of the project for you as a general contractor. Then the last thing that we want to take a look at are contingencies. So contingencies, again, are going to be that safety net that we're looking at. We're not looking at these as money that we hope is available at the end of the project. These are things that are allowing us to be able to put in a competitive bid, but still knowing, because of our experience in construction, that if there's one thing we know about construction, things are going to change. And so we just want to be able to reduce our risk by identifying things that are most likely with this type of project and how much money we think we might need to put aside in order to be able to protect us when that time comes. So you can always go deeper and deeper into all of this. I'm trying to give you an overview of what estimation is. When we go into building an estimate, we will go deeper into all of these areas because there is a lot to understand and learn when we're talking about estimation components. So information is collected from a number of different places. And I think that this is probably one of those areas where people who are new to the industry get a little bit intimidated and a little bit overwhelmed because there is so much information. So what do we do with all of this information? And how do we interpret this information in becoming an actual cost to the project? So we're going to be looking for information in our holy trinity of construction, which are those contract documents. Our contract is going to include the scope of work, which is going to provide us with the information of what the end deliverable is. It's also going to provide us with the time frame and duration that it's expected for us to complete this work. We're going to have specifications that are going to identify the quality of the materials and workmanship expected on this particular project. And we're going to have the drawings, which are going to give us a visualization of many of the different components and expectations of this particular project. We're going to want to establish unit costs. There are some contracts that ask for unit costs right at the very beginning and want you to add that to your contract as an attachment. This provides a very clear understanding to everyone in the room that on day one of the project, your plywood is always going to be $95 a sheet. Okay. So when tariffs hit us or when a material shortage hits us and we come in with a change order and we ask for plywood to be paid for at $145 per piece of plywood, our owner is not going to like that very much because the unit cost said at the very beginning that we were going to agree that it would never be more than $95. So this is going to protect the owner when we are doing a project. But it also helps the contractor because the contractor in that moment is able to understand exactly how much their materials are going to cost for that project. So even if you don't provide a unit cost index attached to your contract, whoever you're working for should have a very clear unit cost for all labor, material, and equipment that your construction company provides. Now, we do have something called industry standard. And when we're using industry standard, these are going to be the expectations of what is expected and standard in the construction industry. So if a contractor doesn't know exactly how good their work needs to be, there is a minimum acceptance that we would look at as being the the minimum quality or the minimum workmanship or the minimum number of screws that are going to be in a sheetrock wall. This is going to be industry standard. A lot of that industry standard is defined by code requirements, which helps guide contractors in what is going to be the minimum requirement. Information can be also collected from historical data. Our historical data is information that we collect based on projects that we've performed in the past that are similar in kind to the project that we're performing now. Now, the thing about historical data is that it needs to be accurate. And if it's going to be collected, it needs to be collected accurately. It needs to be collected in a timely manner. This is why it's so important for superintendents not to crumple up receipts and stick them in the door of the cab of the truck. It is important to be able to code those specific to the job that you're working on so that that data can be collected and analyzed at a later date so that when you have similar projects in the future, you can know how much plywood was used. Excuse me. So, historical data is very important. And so just really recognizing that the information is only as good as the information that you provide. So it needs to be accurate, it needs to be specific to the project that it's referring to. And then we need to remember about market trends and real-time data to cost development. So COVID taught us a lot about this, but we had always had things that happen in the market that remind us that we need to pay attention to what's going on, especially with specific materials, concrete, steel. During COVID, there was a lot of other things that were impacted, doors, windows, things that maybe would normally not have those types of issues. So having an understanding, and again, that crystal ball of anticipation of what could happen on this particular project, because every project has such different um, character about it that could end up changing. And then identifying tools and techniques for accurate pricing. So it just takes work. You have to break things down into smaller components until you feel comfortable of recognizing that you are at the point where you can put together some numbers that really are representing exactly what it is that you are creating. So making sure that we do things like rough order of magnitude where we identify a cost per square foot, but that doesn't provide a lot of detail. That just gives us an idea of what something is going to cost. If you have a $400,000 house and it's a middle of the road house, you can anticipate that it's going to cost somewhere between $285 and $390 per square foot to build, depending on what kind of finishes you have. But you could easily take that same $400,000 house and make it into $1 million house by changing up the different items that are going to be installed in that house. And it could be a smart house with gold toilets and marble floors. And then all of a sudden, it's going to cost $800 a square foot to be able to build. So knowing and understanding the different ways that we use estimating in order to prepare us for the projects that we're getting ready to work on is critically important. So in section 3, we're going to talk a little bit about pricing the elements. So when we're determining competitive pricing, we want to be able to recognize that there are external factors that are going to affect your construction estimates. Under contingency planning and risk forecasting, we're able to get an idea of what some of the challenges might be on your project that are going to expose higher cost or a concern for money or profit being lost. We're going to explore different labor market challenges and workforce planning. You know, everybody in the construction industry right now is saying that we don't have enough skilled workers. Well, what happens when you don't have skilled workers, but you still need people working on your job sites? It becomes many mistakes, which are very expensive. So, being able to explore those challenges in your labor workforce are very important. And then we're going to use allowances and scopes to manage the unknowns. So, for instance, if I have a roof that looks like it's ready to just fall apart, I can pretty much guess that there's going to be some dry rot somewhere. I don't know how much, but if I have that unit cost list attached to the contract, and I can guess that there might be about 200 square feet of dry rot, then I can come up with a dollar amount that includes labor, material, and equipment necessary for me to replace 200 square feet of dry rot if it is found. And in that moment, the owner has a comfortability of knowing that that still falls within the amount of money that they have available to complete this project. And for the contractor, it provides comfortability, knowing and understanding that they're not going to get hung out to dry for something that we would call an unforeseen condition, because it's seen that the roof is not in good shape, and therefore we should assume that there's dry rot, but we don't know if there's any dry rot. So it becomes an unforeseen condition. And section 4, we're just going to go deeper into how to factor the unknowns. Now, when we're talking about the unknowns, we're really talking about having to have construction experience. So up until this point, we really have been able to identify very quantifiable aspects of an estimate that anybody can estimate. You just have to be able to break it down into smaller components and then be able to calculate. So you know the width, you know the length, you know the thickness. Now you need to know the unit cost of that particular material, and then you can calculate the subtotal and then the total cost of it. But when we're talking about outside influences, there are things that your construction experience are going to be really necessary in order to be able to quantify the cost of something. So, for instance, for a bathroom, we can look at a tile wall and we can see that that wall is 10 foot wide and that it is, say, 9 foot high. And that we've decided that the whole wall is going to get tile. So that's 90 square foot of tile. Okay, so 9 foot high times 10 foot width. So 90 foot of square foot of tile, we go to Home Depot and we buy tile for the coverage of that wall. The labor to install that, let's just say it's going to take a day. We've got somebody at $1,100 a day to do that. And so we're able to understand how much the labor costs for that. Now, what I don't know is how difficult is the design that is projected for this wall. In the drawings, is it just a stripe of a different color? If that's the case and the tile all stays the same size, then that's pretty easy. And so there's not a lot of thought or effort or change in the labor to install that tile. But if it's a logo of the Bears and the school wants to put their logo in the middle of the wall, and a tile setter has to go and cut all of the tile to the specific design of a bear for the logo of that school, then that's pretty intricate. And that can end up taking a lot of time and end up taking a lot of effort that is going to significantly increase the amount of labor associated with that portion of the project. It's probably also going to change the amount and quantity of tile necessary, because now we're going to have a higher level of waste when we start cutting into components that are designed a certain size and shape. So those are the type of things that we need to be able to look at, and we need to be able to look at the contract and cipher out those kind of costs. We need to be able to look at the specifications and the drawings to cipher out those kind of costs. And we need to be able to understand how that's going to impact the productivity and efficiency of a project, where we take that now intangible aspect and we apply a tangible number, dollar amount to it. Now, the things that we're mostly used to seeing as untangible unknowns that are going to have cost impact to a project is weather is a big one. So is it raining during a certain part of the project, and can we anticipate that? So if we're going to be doing a concrete slab on grade at the beginning of the project and the project is starting in November, then we know that we may end up having some weather issues that are going to be delaying the work of that particular scope of work. And so we need to have dollars associated with either protection of the area or being able to really suffer through that time extension necessary until the weather gets better. But if that happens in the middle or the end of the project, and we already have the exterior envelope closed in, then we can work inside the building, and that weather raining outside doesn't impact us at all. Might impact us a little bit because it'll be a little bit cooler. So we want to make sure that we have ambient temperature to be able to take care of curing the finishes that we have inside of the building. But these are all things that you're going to learn eventually. You don't have to know everything tomorrow in order to be a good construction manager. So don't worry about it. Do what you can. And what you can do is quantify the calculations for what you do know, and then lean on the experience of the mentors in your office to be able to work out the estimates of the things that you. Oh, having a little bit of trouble there. There we go. So, our outside influences. Some additional factors that you'll want to keep in mind is, again, just understanding contingency planning and being able to forecast those different risks that may be specific to your project. Explore labor market challenges. Are you in a rural area that may not have skilled workers for the particular discipline that you need? And then use allowances and scopes to be able to manage those unknowns. So it just acts as a protection net for you when you're moving through your project estimate. So, systemizing the estimating process. Anytime that we are doing estimating, we want to be able to continue repeating the steps that have been successful for us in the past. So, by systemizing, we're able to compile a complete and accurate unit cost index. We're going to identify and quantify component costs for our labor, material, and equipment. Then we're going to determine outside influences. So that's when you may want to lean on the experiences of your mentors. We're going to apply those add ons for overhead, profit, and markup correctly, and verify assumptions and any document sources that we have. Remember, the more complete your documents are, the more accurate your bid is going to be able to be. We're going to quantify contingencies, and we're going to identify value engineered items. Format and present estimates clearly for your stakeholders, and know your exclusion and inclusion clauses. So, those exclusion and inclusion clauses are very important because your construction company may not be able to do everything that is included within the bid. And so, if you are going to be removing scopes of work from what you are going to be responsible for, then you need to make sure that there's someone else identified to be able to take it on, or that that work has appropriately been redirected to another contractor. A lot of times they won't allow exclusions or inclusions because it ends up being too much overlap that has to be managed. And the general contractor then becomes at risk of being responsible for all of the little things that subcontractors have removed from their particular scope of work. So don't be caught behind. We've been doing a lot of discussion here about estimation, but I just want you to know that you have help. There is software out there for you to be able to use. And a lot of people want to jump straight into it. But I'm telling you, if you don't know how to estimate fundamentally by doing it hands on first, having these softwares is not going to be a benefit to you because you will not be able to determine where mistakes are made. So know how to do estimating before you start relying on different softwares. But there's lots of softwares that can help you, and you just need to determine what kind of software is going to work best with the particular discipline that your construction company is working with. So we have Bluebeam, we have PlanSwift, Timberline, Sage, Ascend, but the most important one is Excel, because everyone can learn Excel And Excel is the foundational grandfather of all software. So all of this other software has to be compatible with Excel. So you can easily copy and paste what you need into an estimating program. So if your company is small, you don't have the money for one of these big time softwares, Excel is going to be able to get you exactly where you need to be, but it has so many different formulas and things to be able to use, and most people don't use it to its full extent. So really understand Excel and how to be able to use it. And then with AI, we have included ChatGPT, which is going to really be able to help us identify ways of capturing historical data and being able to do estimate comparisons of past jobs with previous jobs and future jobs that are coming up so that we can try to really be more competitive in our bidding process and be able to be more effective, efficient with our productivity with the actual work on the job site. So, in wrapping up this training, just know that you need to reinforce key estimating principles that include the different categories of an estimate: direct, indirect, add-ons, and contingencies. Reflect on practical application in real world scenarios by focusing in on those components of labor, material, and equipment. And then understand continuous improvement through estimate review. It's not a one and done. You need to do your estimate, and then you need to have someone else's eyes go over the estimate. Sometimes we get too connected to our work and we can't see mistakes that are right there in front of us. Then I want to encourage you to really understand that regardless of the amount of construction experience you have, you can produce great estimates that are going to be able to help your company win projects. And developing that confidence is going to start by understanding how to break down your estimate and how to be able to identify these categories and components to put it into chewable pieces for you to be able to calculate and assess and quantify the cost associated with the calculations of labor, material, and equipment. Understanding and knowing the more construction knowledge you have, the better at estimating you will become. So, an estimate is only as accurate as the information you are using to create it. So I hope that you enjoyed today's training. We do have some key takeaways. Again, just knowing and understanding that if you break an estimate down first into different categories and understand how each of those categories work and how they contribute to the impact of cost of the project, and then knowing the different components and the different levels of each of those components and how to be able to research unit cost, unit measure, and quantify the everything that's being used in your projects. We're also going to need to know how to really interpret our project documents, not just look at them, not just read them, but be able to pull out and understand the level of difficulty that's being applied to this project, the level of quality that's being demanded from this project, the intricacy involved in this project, the schedule and the impact of time frame and seasons on the different phases of this project. So these are all things where you get to actually start bringing in your own innovation and creativity to try to identify ways to be as efficient as possible and interpret what the drawings are trying to tell you. At its core, this course turns the act of estimating from a back office task into a frontline leadership skill. So, being able to capture this knowledge and structure it is going to help you build confidence in building these estimates to help us with our budgets and winning projects, no matter how much construction experience you have. So, thank you again for being here. I just want to remind everyone you can reach out to us at contact@constructionmanagementonline.com or visit our website, Construction Management Online. I also just want to throw a note out there and let all of you know that our 12-week certification program for construction management essentials is now getting ready for our next cohort. So if you are looking to upscale your personal growth in construction management, then make sure to visit our website and sign up for Construction Management Essentials.